Hey all, welcome back to the channel. So in the last video, we looked at the Docker instructions and its format. We also went through some of the common instructions that are widely used. We did build a Docker file from scratch and we created an image out of it as well. The image was to-do app version 0.0.1 I think. And then we gave that freshly created image a spin by creating a new container, which also ran fine. It went through. The only thing that didn't work was we were not able to access the application from the browser. Even though container was up, we checked that, but we are not able to access the application. So today in this video, we are trying to solve that mystery. Okay, let's go back to our code. Let's go back to the VS Code. Okay, so this was our application. This was our Docker file, and let me check if my container is running quickly. Docker ps, yeah, my container is still running from last 22 hours. Let me see. So it is running on port 22. Sorry, it is running on port 3000 because that's what we have actually mentioned in the code. So right, if you can see, it is running on port 3000. Let me open the new, yeah, I think so. Localhost 3000, yeah, I can't access that. Okay, now if you remember the other day when we were writing this file, we had got some IntelliSense from the Visual Studio Code, which was saying, do you want to expose a port 3000, right? So it was telling, that maybe you want to expose this port because the container has that port, but looks like this port is not published, meaning it is not accessible on host machine, right? So let's try this. Let's try expose and port 3000. Now that we have made changes, we need to build this file again. Okay, and what are we going to do is, we know, so let's check what is the current version we have. We have 0.0.0.1. What we will do is, now we will do docker build -t for tag to do app, and then the version we are going to try is 0.0.2, and my Docker file is in the current path. Okay, my image is built. Let's quickly check. Yeah, you can see the 0.0.2 is available. Let's try to run this. So the way to run is docker run container name or the image name and the version that I want to run now. Okay, now I cannot give 0.0.1 because I have a latest image which is 0.0.2. Let's run it. Yeah, now this is running on port 3000. Let's see if it is accessible. No, it is not accessible yet. So what went wrong? Let me open another tab here. Let's check. So we have both the versions which are running. Okay, and you can see there's a change now where I can see the port 3000 is actually exposed. So earlier there was no container port on which this was running. Okay, I can go ahead and maybe stop this. So I can do docker stop and then container ID, or I can give this name as well, but let me give container ID, and let me do docker rm also. Okay, so now docker ps should give us only one output, which is for 0.0.2. that's the image I'm running. So now we can see the port is exposed, the container port is exposed, but it is still not accessible. Okay, now let's go through documentation regarding the expose. So I am on Docker Hub documentation. Okay, I'm going to look for expose. Okay, let's read through this. The expose instructions informs Docker that container listens on a specified network ports in the runtime. You can specify whether port listens on TCP or UDP, and default port is TCP. So that's why when we did not specify any port, the default one is TCP. If you look at this one, we didn't specify anything, but you can choose to add, let's say, TCP or UDP. We want TCP port, that's why we are not specifying it. We are good there. Let's go back to documentation. The expose instruction does not actually publish the port, right? That's the difference, right? Even though we have exposed the port, but it is not publishing. It functions as a type of documentation between the person who builds the image and person who runs the container about which ports are intended to be published. To actually publish the port when running the container, use -p flag on the Docker run. Okay, so when you are running the Docker run, use the -p flag to run to publish, and map one or more ports, or use -p or let's say -P flag to publish all exposed ports and map them to the higher order ports. Okay, let's look at this now. So we have this container which has exposed port 3000. Now we'll go to Docker run and we'll just run help here. So we have capital P here, -P and then -p. So what it says, capital P, let's talk about capital P first. Publish all exports ports to random ports. Okay, meaning it is going to expose the ports which are exposed to some random ports or to the higher order ports, as it was mentioned here. Some exposed to map them to higher order ports. Okay, let's try -p now. Okay, so we have Docker ps. I'm going to stop this container. So Docker stop this, Docker rm this. Now what I'm going to do is Docker run --help. How do I give this information? So so options come after run and then the actual image. Okay, so I'm going to do Docker run -p, which is capital P, and then I'm going to give an image name to do app 0.0.2. Let's run this. Okay, this is actually running now. Okay, this is actually running on port 3000. Let's do a Docker ps now. Okay, this is interesting. Now what it says, that my container port 3000 was mapped to some higher order, higher order port, which is at this moment is 55,000, and 0.0.0 is nothing but IP of my local machine. Now if I try refreshing this, it is not accessible to me, but the host machine where this port is mapped, 3000 container port is mapped, this is mapped is 55,000. So if I do this, you can see the application is now accessible. Okay, so that's what the port or a capital P does here. So it is exposing the port 3000 to some higher order port, and it is choosing that randomly. It chooses to do this randomly. That was the meaning of capital P. So if you look at Docker run -help, so it is going to publish all exposed ports, whatever ports we have exposed, to some random port. So it picked some random ports which happen to be higher order port and map to that one. Okay, so we are able to access this one. Another thing is -p. Let's try this now. Okay, publish a port, container port, using this specific thing so publish a container ports to the host. So let's look at that now. I will turn off this container now. Okay, so I'm just pressing Ctrl+C. I will tell you one more option regarding how to run this detached, so that we can close this command prompt and container will still start to run. I will talk about that maybe in the next video. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, let me do Docker ps -a. Let me remove the container straight away. So let me do Docker rm this container, Docker rm this container. So Docker ps -a, nothing. Okay, now what I'm going to do is Docker run and then -p. Now when you are providing the ports, okay, I don't know if it has that option available. Yeah, okay. So when you are using this -p flag, okay, you have to give the port like this, right? This is the way you provide the port option, right? Where this is the host port and this is the container port on which you have to map the host port. The way I remember this is high code. H stands for host, C stands for container, right? And the way the mnemonic technique would be to remember this as a high code, okay? So H stands for host machine and C stands for container port. Let's try this one out. So docker run, and then I want to expose my port 3000 on a local machine and map it to my container 3000 of my container, okay? And then what is the image I want to run? To do app 0.0.2. Okay, now we have our application running on 3000. Let's run this. This shouldn't work. It's not working as expected. Let's run this on 3000 now. Okay, now we have exposed our application on port 3000. Interesting, right? Now we are able to, we have able to make this work now. Okay, we are able to make the container run, map the ports. We understood the difference between the different kinds of p flags that are available under the run command. So there were two things, right? The capital P and -p. We understood the difference that when we do it capital P, the Docker kind of takes the liberty to publish it on some higher order port. So there is no mapping or conflicting port. Okay, and it will check the conflict. If it's a conflicting port, then it will choose another port. That's the difference. And when you're using the -p, you have to specify what is the port you want to publish this on the host machine and then map it with the container port. Now, I want to tell you one more thing on this, okay? When you want to, let's say, what if I don't use this, okay? And let's try this, okay? And then I'll tell you a difference between this. So let me do docker build -t to do app. Let me give a newer version now, 003, and then run it here. Okay, now we have docker images. So we can see we have 3 versions now for to do app. Let me remove all existing containers. So docker rm this, so all containers are gone now. Yes. Now I am not exposing any port here, okay? And then let me try to run docker run -p 3000 :3000, okay? And then your image name 0.0.3. So it is running now. Let's check here. Okay, my app is still working fine. Okay, I am refreshing it and still working fine. Groceries, right? So it is still working. Okay, what does that tell you? For a capital P option to use, you need to have that expose defined, otherwise it will not be able to expose. Okay, and for publishing the host and the container port, you know, you have exposed your application on port 3000, then you can choose to use -p directly and expose that host port with the container port. And I'm using like 3000 here, and you can choose to run it on any other port. For example, I want to map this port 8000 on the host machine, and this 8000 gets mapped to the port 3000 on the container. Okay, so if I'm running this is the static kind of a log. Okay, you can ignore this. This is a container basically. When container is running, it is running on port 3000. Okay, but if I access this now, it wouldn't be accessible because this is my host machine. If I want to access this, I need to go to the 8000 now. Okay, so that's you can choose to have different port name, different ports for host machine and the container. I hope that clears. And the way to remember is high code, H for host machine, C for the container port. Okay. The one more point I want to tell you regarding the security aspect of the expose and this port thing, right? So let me go to draw.io. So let me create a new, okay. So let's imagine you have this port, right? So you have this, let's say, shopping service, okay. You have this shopping service which is, let's say, running on port 8080, okay. So shopping port running on 8080, and you have, let's say, a Redis server. I think Redis server runs on 6379 if I'm not wrong. I mean, that's the default one, 6379. Please forgive me if I'm wrong here, kind of forgot. Okay, and then you have your portal. Let's say it is running on 5040 port. Okay, so now portal has to fetch the data from your shopping service. Okay, it has to fetch the data from shopping service, and let's say shopping service connects with the Redis server also for checking if the data is fresh, and can we use that data instead of going back to the database, right? But if you look at from a user point of view, right? If from a user point of view, let me go back. Okay, let's say this is my infrastructure. Okay, infrastructure where my application is hosted. Here, what I would expose is, maybe I can expose this portal 5040 portal to, let's say, port 80, so that I can access this application. So for example, shoppingapp.com. So I can access this, and by default this will go to port 80. And what I'll do is, like, when I'm running this portal container, I will map this with port 80. Okay, so this is where I will do it. I will map my host machine port 80 to, let's say, port 3000. Oh no, it's to port 5040. I think that's my portal port, right? 5040. So that way anyone can use my application on a port 80, so they don't have to put a port. Okay, and what I'll do is, when I'm creating a Docker file for shopping service and run Redis server, I will not add when I'm running them, I will not add a port to those services. What I can do is, I can expose consider this is a shopping service. So what I'll do is, instead of publishing the port, I will expose the port 8080. Okay, similarly, you have a Docker file for, let's imagine you have a new Docker file. You have a new Docker file for Redis server. I will expose port 6379. Okay, now what happens is, because I am exposing this port, so within the network of, and we are going to talk about the bridge network of Docker, right? When these applications are running, they are running in a specific bridge network. So shopping service can, even though Redis server hasn't published its port, it has just exposed. So when you are exposed this, nobody from the external world can connect to the Redis server, and that is the great security that we get, so that we are exposing, and this is exposed to the internal Docker containers. So shopping service still can connect to the running Redis server without publishing the port to the outside world, and also portal can connect to the shopping service without shopping service publishing the port. So it can also expose the port, so that portal can connect to the shopping service without exposing these ports to the outside world. And the only port we want to expose or map is port 80 of the host machine with the port 5040. So that is the security feature that we get with expose keyword or expose instructions. I hope that clears everything. I think we were able to run the container. We were able to understand through this video how to publish the port, what are different ways, what is the security aspect of expose, how to what is the recommended design, and how we should we do that. And we are going to look at more examples going forward. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you everyone. Bye.